Enterprise Management 360.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tech Chat. Now on today's episode, I'm being joined by Tarun Desikan, who is the co-founder and COO at Banyan Security. So welcome Tarun, and thank you very much for joining us on today's episode.
Thank you for having me, Max.
You're very welcome. And if you wouldn't mind, first of all, giving us a little bit of background to our viewers at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a co-founder and CEO of a company called Banyan Security. We're a security company based in San Francisco, California, and we are pioneering a space of security called Zero Trust Network Access. And Zero Trust Network Access is a way to provide secure access to your employees without a VPN, which is going to be the subject of this podcast.
Exactly. Zero trust is definitely a conversation that's creeping up more and more over the past couple of years. And VPN usage in particular has been surging significantly due to lockdowns. But its newfound popularity has shone a really big spotlight on its shortfalls. And it's starting to look like the days of VPNs might be numbered. So I'm interested to get your take on where all of this is going and how people are using it. So I think a good starting off point to begin with is that they're waking up to the vulnerabilities now across organizations. So from your perspective, what can you tell us about the security risks that VPNs pose?
So before we go into the risks, it's interesting to learn about how VPNs came about. So back in the day, you had an office, and if the employee went home and they wanted to log into something in the office, they would fire up a modem. A modem is like a set of telephones, essentially. Mm-hmm. And you dial into the telephone, and once you dial into the telephone, you can access that marketing application or the finance application. And of course, people stopped using modems 20 years ago. So then the network engineers, and I was a network engineer, we came up with the concept of a VPN. And the idea is, instead of a modem that you dial into, you set up a little gateway and you can set up a virtual private network. You can connect into the network. And that's how VPNs were designed, essentially to replace a modem pool and allow you to connect into a network. Now, that worked great for like 10 years, worked great. But if you look at the world today, that's just not how it runs. It's not a one-off remote employee that needs a VPN. Today, for COVID, everyone's at home. Everyone's using a VPN. And so what was kind of a niche connectivity system has become just the primary way people do their jobs. So that's what has really unleashed this problem statement with the VPN. I mean, it's been building up, but it's really come to fore now during the pandemic. Every business that relies on a VPN has to tread carefully. As VPN usage gets, more and more widespread, the fundamental issues with the VPNs become more and more important. And the bad guys are just sitting around. The bad guys are also at home looking for vulnerabilities to get into your network.
Yeah. And
the fundamental idea behind a VPN is that you get broad network access to your entire corporate network. And so all I have to do is fish a low-level, say, marketing employee. And suddenly, once I get the marketing employee's credentials, get their VPN, I have full access to your top secret database, right? So that's the fundamental problem with the VPN.
No, and it's interesting that it is such a relied on method that people are still using. And I think everything happened so quick when everyone went into lockdown, especially in this country. It was very much from tomorrow, you've got to work from home. Panic set in immediately across organizations, and VPNs were set up, and I can't say for definite, but maybe they weren't followed up on either and reviewing that security and coming up with new methods. So as we talk about that, are there any other modern alternatives that you can introduce so that it can take the place of VPNs?
Yeah, so it's exactly what you mentioned. Is the pandemic really actually boosted the usage of VPNs. Even though security professionals for a long time have been saying, hey, listen, the VPNs are not as secure as you like, but on a moment's notice, enterprise IT teams had to provision access for all their employees. Mm-hmm. So what do? You just go to the devil you know. So COVID has definitely increased the usage of VPNs. Huge increase. But in the security realm, it's also highlighting the deficiencies more. And one particular deficiency I want to point out before we go into the solution is that a lot of employees today use cloud resources. We're doing this interview on Zoom. You probably use Slack. You're using Dropbox for your files. You might use Salesforce for your sales team. There are a lot of resources that are in the cloud now. And the VPN was never designed for these cloud environments. It just wasn't. It was meant to replace a modem pool to get into your office. That's what the VPN was meant to do. And so the first thing I think an IT team needs to do is recognize what the VPN is good at and kind of also rethink how they use a VPN and specifically what their business needs. And of course, they may not do it right now because they're all hunkering to just keep up with COVID and just allow the business to continue.
Afloat. Yeah.
Right. But as we get into steady state and as countries like UK start opening back up, it's a good time to take a reality check and just say, is the VPN helping me in my security posture? Like, my employees are bringing their own devices. My applications are going to the cloud. What does the VPN do for me? There's an industry movement called Zero Trust Network Access. And, Gartner writes about it. The analysts write about it. There are other players in the space. I think we're the most innovative one. But there's a general momentum here to move away from techniques that rely on virtual private networking, VPNs. And the idea is to move to what we call a zero trust approach. And the zero trust approach is you rely on the user, you rely on the device and the application they're trying to access. And there are three kind of core principles. The first idea is continuously authorize MACs. So if we detect that you have a malware on your laptop, or if you detect you phished, we just revoke your access immediately. VPNs could never do that. The second concept is to score you on how trusted you actually are. So don't just assume that you're always at the same level of trust, recognize that it might change. And so compute that. And finally, of course, you have to enforce this. And so there are three core principles for any new technology that comes out to replace a VPN. And that's kind of what we have been pioneering in this space.
Excellent. And I find zero trust very interesting. It's a conversation I've been having over the past couple of years now. But would you agree there's still that kind of hesitation from a lot of organizations to kind of jump on that bandwagon and really implement it fully? And where does that hesitation come from?
Well, you and I both know enterprise IT, and it's typically slow to move. You adopt a technology, and it's hard to get rid of something that's working that you've used for a while. So realistically speaking, and I designed some of the first VPNs. VPNs are here to stay forever. VPNs are not going anywhere. And so I don't think anybody can go into this market realistically saying VPNs are going away. They're not going away. But I think the general idea is a recognition that their usage will decline. Right? The VPN will not be used by your average employees. The VPN will go back into its niche where it's just a network administrator, your IT guys who might need a VPN. But the average employee should never need a VPN to do their job. And I think that I see coming in the future. So we have to have a kind of a transition plan to get from where we are to where we need to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one positive that might come out of all of this is we're seeing a lot of digital transformation. You've said it yourself, and we've seen it all over. Cloud adoption is skyrocketing at the moment because everyone's realizing they need it for that kind of remote workforce option. So maybe we'll see that conversation with the zero trust running along parallel, which kind of leads me to my final question of what are your kind of expectations, or I should say hopes really, for the future of VPNs and zero trust in general?
So I think, when you start a business, you don't expect a global pandemic to suddenly drive
Exactly.
it. But that's the reality. I think at least for a certain class of businesses, Zoom, Slack, some of these other businesses that were built on the concept of remote work. The pandemic has really brought it to the forefront of people's minds and enterprise IT discussions. And similar for us, we were founded with the idea that you would not be in your office. Like, you should design a security system that didn't involve me dialing into an office. And that was our whole thesis. And our hope was that, as people started working from home more often, people would adopt Banyan more.
No, I think that's a very interesting point that you raise, and it's exciting to see where this kind of space grows, because when I normally ask that question, it's always a dead answer. But with everything going on at the moment, it's difficult to make those predictions. So it's going to be interesting to watch this space, and it'll be great to kind of speak to you in the future as well, Tarun, to kind of see where all of this goes. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Tech Chat. It's been fantastic talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much again. And I look forward to engaging with your listeners soon as well.
Excellent. And yes, thank you everyone who took the time to watch this episode. We hope you took a lot away from this. In the meantime, please make sure you go on over to our social channels, which is at EM360 on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel. And of course, for more great daily content, make sure you head on over to em360tech.com.